This chamber, these two here, face the opposing way. So I can put them on there, no problems at all. But what I need to do is give them some lubrication to aid their longevity. So the lubrication helps them slide on the piston as well. Look how easy they slide up and down. So no problems at all. Now, would you put them on the piston or would you put them in the housing? The same as what I showed you before. When I slid that seal onto the piston, it went on quite easily and there wasn't much chance of me guillotining the edge of the seal off. So by putting it on there first, I can make sure that it's square, make sure that it's got adequate lubrication, like so, and they slide down there easily. Now what you'll find is if you bring them back up off the seat a fraction, now I can watch that go on. Now remember what I said about the hole here and the mark. So we put a mark on there to make sure that we've got it in the right place. So all you need to do is now slide this back over. Do I need to check anything on the way in? Of course I do. Make sure that that dowel remains in the locator on the cylinder. So what you can do before I do that, just grab your pen. I've got it right there, I know that, but when I invert it, I can't see. So just to make sure I've got it right, 2 marks so I can see that that hasn't moved. So there's the hole. It needs to come around this way, like so. Now I can slide that down over the top. Oh, but hang on a minute, what's going on? It's not going all the way home. Well, all I have to make sure is that these start in the body. So bring it back up, slide the seals back up again, like so, and start them in the housing. Then, by placing it into place, like so, there's my locators. Now it's sitting up slightly, don't worry about it, because when I bring the torque on these bolts, it's going to push it back into place. All you have to make sure is you keep it square. So what was under this? Your neoprene seal. Now, that's got a taper on it. That taper caters for the bottom of your piston. Can I put it in the wrong way? Absolutely, I can put it in the wrong way. So just remember when you pull this apart, the taper faces the piston because the piston has to seat down to that taper. Now, the differentiation in pressure that I was talking about, when you pull this seat out sometimes, you might see that it's chewed across one edge. Oh no, we haven't got another seal, what do we do? Well, say for example, when you pull it apart, and this is where you need to take note, is when you pop that out of there, if that was at, say, 6 o'clock, that it had a recess cut in it, that differentiation of pressure, have I found where it was? Was the nozzle worn? Is the pop-up valve sealing? All of these things, I've established that it may have been the nozzle was worn, or it may have been I had an air leak, or it may have been the pop-up valve wasn't seating properly. So I fixed that, I remedied that problem. So okay, then I've remedied the problem, but I don't have a spare one of these. That's why when you take this out, take note of where it was. So if that track cut across there was at 6 o'clock, to get me out of trouble today, I'll turn that around to 12 o'clock. So if it was at 6 o'clock, I'll turn it around to 12 o'clock, put it back in, and that'll keep me going for today only. Get me out of trouble until I can get another spare, ring up the guys at the help desk and say, look, I need another seat for this immediately, and they'll get one to you. So that goes back in to this housing itself. So that's saved the day. I know what the problem is. I fixed the differentiation in pressure, and I just pop the seal back into the body. So it might fight you a little bit to get it back in there, but all you have to do is just work the edges around to get it back into the housing. So do I need to use something sharp to get it back in there? What do you think? Well, it wants to pop out on me. So what I suggest you do is that graphite that you've got everywhere, you slide it back in, because remember that's got to go on there. So if I get everything in place, do I need to put anything else on there? What's the story? Well, that sits on there and that sits in there. So it's got to go back in place the appropriate way. So, have I got that round the right way? Let's have another look. Which way did that go? So you see, this is why you mark these things to make sure you've got them round the right way. You can make a mistake. So let's have another look at this. Did that seal go in there? Is that why that housing wasn't going in properly? You see what I mean? So take note of what you take off there. Now here's the significant factor. See the recess here and the recess here? Look at this. That goes back up in there, and see how that just went back together much easily? Now look at this one. That's on the bottom. So when I took it off, was that on the top? No, it was on the bottom, because the grit comes down through here and that lets me evacuate that way. So now look at what we've got. We've got our seat, our piston, and guess what? That will go in that body so much easier. Can you make that mistake? I've seen people do it so many times, and that's why I've done it around that way, to show you that it is possible to actually put this unit back together the wrong way. And you see what happens is when you move things, things come off. See, it fits. And you think, oh, that's all right, I've done that. Not at all. Because I didn't mark it before I pulled it to pieces, you can get lost in what you're doing. So there you go, that goes around there. It's on the piston. Slide them back up the stem, like so. Bring them together. Which way does this go? It went on the bottom. Where's the hole there? Opposing to the hole. Slide this back over. Hold them in place. Push that back down. And look at that. It's gone back into the place it should be. The pin is still in the right place. The dowel is in the right place. Now your seat will fit so much better. Look. Ta-da! Happy days. Put this back on. Sit it like so. A little bit of graphite dust on the thread. And there's copious amounts of the stuff here. Like so. Now you can see why it's important that when you pull stuff apart, make sure that you know how they go back together. But there's nothing wrong with taking a picture of what you're doing. So I can actually take a photo of that with my phone if I'm allowed to have a phone on site. Take a photo, then you can see the reassembly of it. But don't feel stupid that you do this. Because even if you've been doing it for many years, I still mark stuff because I can be interrupted. I can answer a phone call and lose my train of thought. And that's why I showed you that all these bits will actually go back together and inadvertently be around the wrong way. And you won't find that out until you put it back on the pot. Then you'll feel quite frustrated. So again, we do these up diagonally, like so. And I can also use a socket if I want to. Right, so remember what I said, diagonally. So just pull it up. Now watch this. These are all coming together now. There you are, that one's touched. That one's touched. Now I can just do these up. It's important that it goes together square. There is so much pressure and so much CFM travelling through this particular item. It's imperative that you put it back together correctly. If you're unsure, ask somebody that does know. So if you put it back together and you think, oh, have I got that right? There's nothing wrong with making a phone call to the help desk and say, look, mate, I've had this valve apart. I'm not sure if I've got it right, and they'll talk you back through it to ensure that you have got it right. So remember what I said about putting things in the vise? Don't squash any of the body. So look, I'm putting this and this in the vise. Nip it up like so. Don't damage those threads. Now I can have a little bit of purchase on there. So if I was on site, I'd have that on the ground in the jaws of a pair of Stilsons to hold it in the same place. Don't over tighten these because they're only BSP, which is a very coarse thread. And remember, this is only aluminium cast, so you can strip the guts out of that, no problems at all. So I've got a fair bit of purchase here. So now that I've done that, with the open ender, now check that there's sufficient torque on there so that the thing can't come undone. So now I've got a valve that's been refurbished, checked, tolerances checked. When I did this, the piston in the cylinder, would you go to the trouble of getting a set of gauges and checking the clearance? Look, to be quite honest with you, if it's sloppy on the shaft, just replace it. If it's done a lot of work and the piston's got wear on it, just replace it. Why do I say just replace it? Because there's a lot of pressure running through here and there's no room for compromise. If you think it's worn, replace it. If you're not happy with it, replace it. You can get kits for all of this, as I mentioned. So if you find something that's been compromised, like a seal, the piston stem, the seat, whatever, just replace it and you know you'll be safe, because it's all about staying safe. So make sure that when you put your brass threaded coupling on here on your pusher line, the pusher line's got a gasket in it. Ensure that the gasket's in good repair, but use lots of this graphite dust on the gasket, because when you do that retaining nut up to hold the hose on there, you can actually spin the gasket and the gasket can actually get caught like this and go into that orifice. So make sure there's lots of graphite dust on. So what happens is when you do it up, the gasket spins with the fitting instead of being pinched in one spot and end up doing this and going into the hole. So where's that going to end up? Well, to be quite honest with you, this has enough velocity and capacity to send that through the entire hardened pipe and up to your nozzle. You'll be blasting, next minute nothing's coming out. What's wrong with this? It takes a while to come back and find out that that's gone through there, through the whole hose, and ended up in the back of your nozzle. And then you have to come back and undo it again and start again. So that's why I suggest you put a mild lubricant on there so that it doesn't twist about. So it doesn't matter to check your bolts or have somebody check these bolts to make sure they're tight. Now I can wind this all the way in till it's home. And when I say home, that means you run out of thread and it hits the bottom of the seat. You see here that you've got increments. You can see where you adjust it to. So there you are. I can feel the resistance now, it's stopped. So what was the setting I said for this valve? To get you fundamentally in the right place, what you'll do is you'll go 1, 2, 3.5. So 3.5 to 4. Now if you want to and you think, oh, I've forgotten where that was. These little indentations here, I can put a mark there. There's 3.5 turns. Okay? So if I forget where the knob was, if I wind it in just to blow down, because that's the beauty of this valve, I can wind this in and just blow the area off, wind the valve back out to appropriate the grit again. There's the mark. So there's a big plus with this particular valve. So with this valve, as opposed to other valves, if I turn that 1/4 of a turn, that's a significant decrease in the amount of grit that's coming through this pusher line or the hardened pipe. So it's quite refined in its dispensation of grit. The best part about it is that with an after-cool air prep, if I'm utilising dry air, if I set that today, that'll be the same day in, day out, day in, day out. The same amount of grit will come through there every day. So I don't have to keep coming back and adjusting this valve to compensate for moisture. That's why an air prep is imperative and complements this application. So if you follow those procedures, stay safe, make sure you wear safety glasses when you're doing anything that's going to require grinding that nut off if you round it off. And of course you'll wear the appropriate PPE if you do start grinding anything. If it's been compromised and you have to grind it, of course, what did I say? Just replace it. The bolts, if you strip them, replace them. So everything on this particular valve is in good repair at all times. So if you follow those procedures, you'll get the longevity required from an item such as that. Trouble-free motoring. Thanks very much.